There we go. Hey! Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Witches and Wine. I am your hostess with the mostest, Lola Stardust. Woo! Woo! Everyone's supposed to applaud. Yeah! No. Yay! And this is the show where we talk about witchy stuff and we drink wine. Clink and whoa! Yeah. What wonderful wine. So, just a disclaimer that we are now putting on the beginning of our show is this show is called Witches and Wine, and sometimes in a show that has wine in the title, we will drink wine, and sometimes when people drink wine, they get a little tipsy. So for the viewers that are watching this, if you don't like to see tipsy people talk about witchcraft, there's this really cool thing called Don't Watch Us. All right, so there's the disclaimer.
There's a nice little X button on the right upper corner of your screen.
Yes, and you can
click it at you do not want to see alcohol use.
Yes, there is alcohol use in this video. Disclaimer. All right, so speaking of alcohol, I'm going to turn this over to my partner in crime, Silenist Stardust, and he's going to tell us about the wine we're drinking tonight.
Hi guys. Tonight I have chosen a Napa Valley Cabernet called Philippe, Lorraine. It's a little small boutique winery run by the Baxter family. It is a father-son operation. This is a 2011 reserve that we're drinking this evening. Softer as a Cabernet goes, not huge tannins. It's going to be more bramble fruits, less cherry, less blackberry. It's going to be more of your boysenberries and your raspberries, which is interesting on a Cabernet because it's not what you typically get out of Napa.
Yeah.
Very elegant. Do not serve this with a big old fat steak. It's going to be dominated by the steak, and you're not going to get any of the wine flavor.
Oh, really?
Yeah. This is too soft of a Cabernet. This is a nice Cabernet to do with a softer red meat that you want to have present, but not be the feature of the dinner.
Like a stroganoff or something where it's not like you're the okay.
Yeah, like a broccoli beef dish would go perfectly with this. And if you can find the wine, it's going to run you between $30 and $40 a bottle. Interesting, unique, more for the developed palate. If you're just getting into the cabs, this is probably not the wine for you because it's got some odd flavors to it.
It's odd. You got to be used to cab. It's good. We're Cabernet drinkers, so this is really good. But it's very different.
Yeah.
It's very different.
Yeah. And it,
Not bad different.
it's Philippe Lorraine once again. So I'm going to go ahead and step out now, and Lorraine's going to step on in, and then we're going to get started with our wonderful guests who we've all been excited to talk to.
Yay.
So I'm going to go ahead and see you guys soon.
Take a seat. Get out of here. Get in here. Hello. This is my co-host for those who are just tuning in for the first time. It's Lean. She is my coven sister. She is the Martin to my Lewis.
I'm her emotional support human.
Yes, today she was my emotional support human. She went to the dentist with me. So, and then we have the staff at the dental place saying, and support human, you can sit here. All right, so we have a special guest tonight. He is so fascinating. We know him from ATC festivals, and we know him through the school. I'm going to introduce him, and then we'll take it away. This is Roman Delgado. Hi, Roman.
Hola. Hello.
Hola, Roman. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and who you are?
Hello, my name is Roman Delgado. I am a shamanic practitioner. I am a conjureman. I have a background in brujeria. I have a background in Reiki. And I've practiced many different magical practices, ranging from the obscure and dark to the lighthearted, like Reiki. I have a background, for example, in necromancy. I work heavily with the dead. So I have a very wide a range of tools in order for me to help the people who come to me for help in healing, both in this side of the veil and the next.
Awesome. And have you ever worked with, this just came to, like I said, well, we never went over this when we talked before, but that's what happened. You just inspired me. Have you ever worked with helping people pass over, like a death doula or anything like that? Is that something you've ever done?
I am in shamanic healing. That work is the designated psychopomp work. I am trained to psychopomp work with people who are ready to release their physical bodies. I never had the opportunity to actually do it. I have only the training. What I've done quite a lot of is crossing over the spirits of the dead who are stuck in the physical plane, in particular during my work unraveling generational curses.
I see. Oh, okay. So I want to talk about that later, but there's training to do that, because I would love to pick your mind off camera about that, because something spoke to me through Hecate and through some things that I've been going through recently with my family. I think I want to go into doing like a death doula. And I think I'd be really good at that. And so just to talk to someone about the training and stuff, we can maybe talk about that later or whatnot. I think that would be awesome.
Definitely, we can chat about it later.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things I want to talk to you about is I listened to your one that you were a guest on a podcast that I listened to, and it absolutely fascinated me. Me and my husband were listening to it. Your experiences. You had said, a friend of yours said they could write a book about everything that you've been through, everything that you've done. So has anyone ever thought about writing a book about you? Because that would be fascinating.
Actually, when I first started training with the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, my teacher was a very prominent anthropologist in the area. She was a teacher with the University of Washington in Seattle. And when I told her my story about how I came to be called into the path, both as a healer and as a sorcerer, she says, "No, I could write my master's thesis on you. I could write I could write a whole book about your story." And I've known people who have written books about other people with similar stories throughout the world.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. I want to get to some of that stuff here. So can you tell us a little bit about what shamanism is? And the reason why I asked this is kind of a twofold thing. One, people who watch our show, some are experts in all things occult-like, magic-like, but some are new. They're just starting out. And two, because
there's a lot of misconceptions about what shamanism is.
And I am fascinated with it. I know several people that practice it, but when I listen to how you explain it and what you talk about, it really resonated with me. Can you just explain what shamanism is?
Shamanism is the first form of spirituality for humankind. Shamanism is what started happening when humanity began to develop as groups of people. Shamanism is designated by people, labeled shamans. The word shaman comes from Siberia, from the Tungus tribe in Siberia, and it means he who sees in the dark. Shamans are capable, through the use of several different tools, to exit our bodies and enter a different reality, which is, we call it the spirit world. Shamanic practitioners in the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, we call it non-ordinary reality. Okay. And in this place, which has its own cosmology, actually, we are able to interact with spirits in the spirit world and bring back not only healing, but wisdom and knowledge for the sake of those who come to us for help.
I love that. And I took notes on you because this is how fascinated I am. I do not take yes. I think I did with one or two others. I did one other person. I took notes on, or one, not even a person. I think it was the topic we did that I took actual notes. So I never look at notes. I go off them. But there's so much about you that I'm like, I want to make sure I touch upon these points. Are we gonna get an echo from the speaker? Oh, we shouldn't. But can you go look on your phone and see how we sound? Go in the backyard. Get out of the house.
Are we live though, or are we just recording?
Oh, we're just recording.
So he can't check.
Oh wait, you can't check. I don't think we do because it's the same whenever I have a call with anyone. Okay. I use my sister all the time. Okay. I come in just fine. Okay.
I just want to make sure because sometimes you get the echoes.
It switched microphones. Okay. So yeah. Sorry. Anyway.
Side note.
Yeah, just a side note. Anyway, so what I want to talk about is, first of all, when you said something that all magic comes from shamanism, they were the original witches, I guess you could say, to put it. The OGs. The OGs. And I find that fascinating. But there's something you said, you do not call yourself a shaman.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
And particularly because it's not accurate to my culture.
Okay.
You know, I said shamanism comes from the Tungus tribe in Siberia. It means he who is in the dark. I am not Siberian, and I am not member of the Tungus tribe. I call myself a shamanic practitioner because of my training with the Foundation for Shamanic Studies. And when people ask me about my own personal practices, I call myself a brujo, which in Mexican culture, that means sorcerer. Yes. Sorcery and shamanism are two sides of the same coin. One of them is designated to help heal. The other one is designated to help harm. In Mexican culture, the brujo, the sorcerer, is the arm of the law when society itself has failed you. When there is no one left in society who will set a wrong that has been done to you, you go to the brujo to make sure that somebody gets their heads out of their butts.
Okay, so here's a misconception. Does it? Because my grandmother, we talked earlier, my grandmother, my mother told me stories about my grandma, who's Mexican, and the things that my grandma would do, and the people would whisper, they would hear rumors, they'd hear the word bruja, she's a bruja. I grew up thinking that meant, and this is what I want to talk about. I grew up thinking that was Spanish for witch, but does that, it's sorcerer?
It's sorcerer, and it is not witch. If you speak to any Mexican brujo or bruja, and you call them a witch or a pagan, you're going to have some serious problems in your hands, because those are fighting. Every single brujo and bruja that I have met, myself included, consider ourselves Catholic, because there's a very huge influence into Catholicism in Mexican brujeria. A lot of the magical workings that I do involve prayers out of the Bible, involve talking to the saints and to the Holy Trinity and to the Blessed Mother and into the ancestors. Yes. It is why brujeria in general, in Mexico in particular, has more similarities to Southern conjure and voodoo and santeria than it will ever do to witchcraft.
Okay, and that's what fascinates me, because
I love the like synchronistic kind of aspects that come with that. Like, it's just fascinating to me that you have this like little bit of this, and we're gonna mix it with a little bit of that, and then poof, we've come up with this whole other system. It's just cool that humans do that.
Yeah, and I feel, for me, why this fascinates me is because my grandmother never claimed to be a bruja. She was more of a healer, and so she practiced and I never can say it,
curanderismo.
Thank you. Yes.
Brujeria and curanderismo, much like the shaman and the sorcerer, are two sides of the same coin.
Okay.
It is a spectrum. It is a spectrum. In one end, you have the healers, the curanderos and the curanderas, who focus their entire lives on healing and on helping others and in removing curses and healing the sick and all of that. And in the other, you have the brujo or the bruja, whose main job is to be the law when the law has failed.
Okay. And can people do both?
Yes, I do.
Okay. You do. Okay, yes. And so
with the same amount of ease that I can heal someone, I can put them on the grave.
And
that's the same as like a lot of witches will do that. Like a witch who can't curse can't heal. If you can't harm, you can't heal. So it's the same kind of spectrum and that same dichotomy along with it.
And I think that's fascinating that we're using the word fascinating a lot. I need to think of another word.
Isn't it fascinating?
It is the word of the day. Let's call it the word of the night.
The word of the day is fascinating.
And we'll try and use it sporadically from now on.
Oh my God.
We will try and use it sporadically.
Yes. Oh, yes. So I find it interesting that when you bring up Santeria and voodoo and all that, the work with the saints, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, from what I understand is they use that to still incorporate their belief in Catholicism, but also practice something that maybe your mainstream Catholics would find uncouth. And so the bringing and work and integrating the saints with that kind of work made it almost acceptable to their personal morals and ethics. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yes, and you're incorrect.
I'm wrong.
It has nothing to do with that. It has nothing, both in hoodoo, in Southern Conjure, and in brujeria, it has nothing to do with easing the idiosyncrasies of Catholics. It has everything to do with oppression. My ancestors were colonized by Catholics from Spain. When they came to the Americas, they came on the exact date that a prophecy by one of the very first Aztec emperors says that he would one day return in order to bring healing and better rulers to the land. Quetzalcoatl was a king and a god. And much to the dismay of the Aztecs, the Castilian Spaniards with their blonde hair and green eyes fit the description of Quetzalcoatl. When they came, they saw the vast amount of jewels and gold and silver that the Aztecs had in their ceremonial ritual garb. And that's why they colonized. I have ancestors of mine who lived and died in mines, who never knew what the sun looked like, who never felt air in their faces.
Yeah.
They spend their entire lives from birth to death living in mines.
Yeah.
That is energy very similar to how Africans were enslaved in Africa, brought in ships and brought over into the New World. It was never about not offending people. It was a way of keeping our cultural power and identity through the hard times, because the Spanish Inquisition was active in Mexico, and there were many native people and slaves who were burnt at the stake for practicing their indigenous practices.
Yeah.
So what the true reason behind the utilization of Catholicism is to hide our cultural identity and keep some of the power that our ancestors have passed down to us.
Okay.
Because that's like anything in the Spanish Inquisition was literally like you're either with the church or you're evil.
Yes. Yeah.
You're either with us or you're not with us, and then you just need to be destroyed.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are people in Mexican brujeria who actually do something very similar to what people in Santeria do. You know, Santeros get the Orisha, and they equate them with Catholic saints.
Okay.
There are some native Mexican people in the central parts of Mexico who will tell you, no, that saint is really that ancient Aztec deity or that one or that.
Well,
but those teachings are a little bit more hard to come by unless you know people who hold them.
Okay, and isn't that kind of similar to, I mean, the way we have many faces of our everyone's deities and saints and whatever you want to call them have evolved into different names. And so isn't it kind of similar to that? If someone says, oh, that's this person, isn't that, they might hold the same attributes or the same, you know what I'm saying?
It can be.
Is it?
Because I'm thinking like the Hellens, like in Hellenismos, the thought process is that the Olympic and Greek gods are the perfect version of the gods. So they'll be like, oh, Odin, yeah, cool. He means Mercury.
Yeah.
He means Hermes.
Or Zeus or whatever.
Yeah, I use the Roman name, but you know, there's equations. That's the way that the Greeks did it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a similar aspect of that.
Yeah.
We know the real name.
When it comes to the African diasporic traditions, which is hoodoo and voodoo and santeria, and Mexican brujeria, having that frame of mind can come across as incredibly offensive. Because our teachings, the way we had to do this, was not because people travel around the world and we brought our gods with us. It's because we had ours taken away. It's because we were forced to be subservient to people who wanted nothing more than to harm us. It is why we normally do not associate them with that type of energy, and why when somebody equates brujeria or conjure or voodoo or hoodoo with modern day paganism, it normally doesn't go well, because it's born out of two completely different energies. One of them is born out of the celebration of the gods. The other one is born out of oppression.
And that's and so that makes more sense to me, because I feel that a lot of those, like voodoo, santeria, there's a lot of so much dark, and for me, dark is not evil. From what I believe and what we talk about, dark is not evil. It's just a necessity to get shit done.
Well, and a lot of it is you're doing what you know, and if all you know is the boot that's on your foot, then that's the way it's going to the world. It's a perspective thing.
Well, I'm going to give you a story that one of my elders passed down to me to help understand the whole dark thing. Let's begin by the realization that hoodoo, santeria, and voodoo were all born out of the suffering of African slaves. Plain and simple. The reason they are feared and hated, it's because voodoo started the first African democracy in the world. The Haitian Revolution began with a voodoo ritual. That is why it's feared, because it empowered people who are powerless, like the African slaves were. Now, in hoodoo, there's this beautiful story about Mama Moses, which is the folk name for Harriet Tubman, who was a conjure woman in her own right.
Cool.
Harriet Tubman, in an interview when she was elderly and close to death, they asked her if she ever regretted anything about what she did. And she told this story about when she was young and she was still a slave. The master of the plantation her and her family was owned by were about to sell her family, and she was about to be sold off to someone else. And she prayed to God, that he would change his mind, that she wouldn't do it, that he wouldn't do it, that he wouldn't do it, and nothing happened. God did not hear her prayers. Then one day, in a bout of anger and desperation, she screamed to the heavens in despair. If this man does not change his mind about selling my family away from me, I want you to kill him, God. He was dead by morning. He says, that is the only thing I wish I had never done. I wish I could have found another way. But here is the caveat in that. There was no other way. If people see the darkness in hoodoo, conjure, voodoo, santeria, and brujeria, it is a reflection of the oppressive nature of how Western culture has evolved. It is because Western culture, not only American culture, but a lot of Hispanic cultures, how it has been formed. We are a culture that has been born out of oppression. And hoodoo, santeria, voodoo, and brujeria are all ways in which people who have been oppressed by those systems defend themselves.
And I've always embraced the word bruja, because my like I said, my grandmother, I only met her a couple times in my life, but everyone who has known me and her, I am the most like her. My mother tells me that we've talked twice in our lives. She passed away a long time ago. She used to write letters to me because we connected in this way. And so when I heard that my grandmother was called a bruja, I just embraced that word, and not knowing any negative connotations, because in my mind, my grandma is not negative. My grandmother was amazing and this magical healer and whatnot. So to me, bruja, and I guess ignorance is bliss, But bruja to me was I was proud of it, and it's not ignorant. It's just that's what I did. And I remember when I claimed I found on, and it was on Facebook. You get those frames that you put around your profile, and there was one that said bruja, and so I put it up, and I all of a sudden got a couple messages from people, elders in the pagan community that said, honey, that bruja is a negative.
Isn't that funny?
I know.
I always get it from like the inner circle, so to speak. It's not quite the inner circle because it's different, but it's still like, I thought you guys would be more understanding than that.
Yeah, and so I got messages that bruja has negative connotations, and I don't know if you want to be associated with that. That caught me off guard.
Well, it's understandable, and particularly in pagan circles, because a lot of pagan and Wiccan traditions are about not doing harm. The Wiccan read, and it's a perfect example that if it harm none, do what you will. And remind the rule of three: whatever I send, it gets back times 3. However, that is not present in brujeria.
Yeah,
Brujos and brujas are not negative, but we are feared. We are the people who, when I was a child growing up in Mexico in my grandmother's house, people would cross the street to go past our house.
That's like my grandmother.
People would not talk to us, but when shit goes down and push comes to shove at 3 o'clock in the morning and your life is falling apart, they were knocking on our door for somebody to fix it.
Of course.
It's sort of, and I know this is not the right kind of thing, but it's sort of like with the aunts in Practical Magic in the movie, because it's suddenly like everyone's like crossing the street to avoid the aunts,
but then all of a sudden
all of a sudden they're like,
I love that movie because of the aunts.
I
absolutely love it. It reminds me of my family back home.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I really want to talk to you off camera and get contact information, because I was just telling my husband that I really want to get in touch with my Mexican heritage and what my grandmother did and find out more about that kind of work, because I have a calling towards it, because it's in me, it's in my, and so what I wanted to talk to you about was cultural appropriation. We had, and trust me, any opinion that you have on it is not judged. It's an important topic to talk about.
Okay.
Because I feel that we all, yes, there is cultural appropriation, but I also feel that sometimes certain people who practice different kinds of magic and different kinds of things that they find fascinating, there's the word of the day, that they find fascinating, they do research on and they honor it in that way. But I also understand why some people get upset about cultural appropriation, because I feel that you do need to have some sort of connection on some level, whether it be embedded in your DNA or your hereditary or whatever, that makes it more special. And the reason why I bring this up is because when we had Luna on, Luna Eclipse, and she was talking about my memory, Santa Muerte. And then someone left a nasty comment that I just found the other day, and I deleted it because I don't want.
I moderate all my comments.
I didn't want that. I didn't want that kind of energy. But this person was very upset that she has no Hispanic descent, ancestry. This is why she's here. She helps me with words and my thoughts. To be talking about that. And so, what do you feel about it? Because you are of that descent. You practice that.
I know Luna very, 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 very well. She's a dear, dear friend of mine.
Yeah.
We were actually roommates for a couple of years.
Yeah.
I am the person who introduced her to Santa Muerte.
Yeah, and she's the one that said,
we need to
get together.
I was her first teacher about working with Santa Muerte, and about Santa Muerte and cultural appropriation. I've had numerous discussions with people who share in the community who knew Luna, when she lived in the area, who shared the idea, oh, she's not Mexican or she's not Latina, blah, blah, blah. My thought is the following. Death is not a cultural concept. It is a human experience. Death is the great equalizer. And if people think that we should be keeping these teachings within the Mexican community or only to Latinos or people who have a connection, the world is not getting bigger. The world is getting smaller. With each passing day, people have more and more ability to take their smartphone, pump up Santa Muerte, and they will come a whole boatload of bullshit that they could be trying to believe.
Yeah.
The realization needs to happen to people who do the work that I do, that if we do not want people culturally appropriating our craft, taking what we teach, twisting it out of shape, and then putting it out there on the internet for people to learn as authentic when it's not, we need to be opening our fucking mouths and giving the teachings that are real and that are accurate to people who will respect them and do right by them.
Yeah.
I have absolutely no opinion to what Luna's doing with Santa Muerte. I love the fact that she makes no claim to be traditional, that she makes no claim to be authentically Mexican or anything. Between me and her, I often joke that she teaches Santa Muerte for Wiccans.
Yeah. That makes sense.
And if that and that is accurate to what she's doing. As far as cultural appropriation, the only thing that pisses me off is when people take teachings from my culture, they alter them, they Wiccanize them, or they paganize them, and then they sell them off in their books to Llewellyn saying, no, this is the real deal.
Authentic,
Yes.
It's sort of like, just to go with the something most people will understand, Taco Bell is cheap food. It's delicious, but it's not authentic Mexican food.
Definitely.
Absolutely. So, I want to talk about how you came into shamanism. You told a story about when you were little. Can you share that?
Yeah. When I was a baby, I was actually born in San Jose, California. When I was a tiny little baby, my mother baby napped me and took me to live with her and my grandmother and her family in a small town. Well, back then it was small, now it's huge. In a town in the west coast of Mexico called Tepic, in the Mexican state of Nayarit.
Okay.
In that state, my grandmother lived. And much to my dismay, which I did not know until I started, being old enough to notice things, is that my entire mother's family were, when my grandmother was alive, world-renowned sorcerers. People would come from all over the country to talk to my family. Most of my aunts and my uncles were black magicians, including my mother. My mother was a very powerful diablera. She worked exclusively with demons. My grandmother was a hierbera. She was a curandera. She spent many years in her life doing brujeria, but when she converted to Catholicism, she goes, no, now I'm only going to use my skills to heal. So that was much to my benefit, because when I was very, very small, I got really, really sick. My family, some of my aunts and uncles were incredibly wealthy. So I was taken to the best doctors that Mexico had to offer. And everybody says, no, it's like a sinus infection or something really small. We don't understand why he's dying. And I was. Then something happened when I was about 4 years old. There was a very big storm. It was the tail end of a hurricane type of energy, that big. There were trees down. The streets were flooded. I could not get out of the house to go to the doctor, and no doctors could come to me. I had a very high fever, and I was dying. At that moment, I remember it's one of my first memories, leaving my body, and behind me seeing Mictlan, the darkness of the grave of my ancestors behind me, and above me this radiant light, and in it came the saint that watched over my grandmother's work as a curandera. And she was the same saint that watched over my family. And she looked at me and goes, you have two choices. For the rest of your life, you can work for me, or you can die right here, right now. You can be at peace.
And you were 4?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh my gosh. That's a big decision for a 4-year-old. No pressure.
It is
no
not
pressure.
unknown in the realm of shamanism.
And that's what I wanted to talk about, was
Yeah.
that you were saying that that's the initiation in shamanism.
It is the first initiation.
Okay.
Shamanism is an initiatory path because each time we level up, the helper spirits that teach us to do our work kind of help us not get up another notch in different forms of initiation. I had other initiations that I do not speak about with the spirits because people who have not been through them will not understand them, or they will not even believe it happened. Because
But you do have several.
on TV or in books.
Okay. But you do have several initiations.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you said a saint came to you. I know on the podcast, she didn't ask you who the saint was. She just said she thinks she knew who it was. Do you not reveal that name? Is that personal?
No, ma'am.
Okay. I just wanted to. I kind of figured
the work
that.
that I do with my helper spirits is between me and them, and it is intimate and is sacred to us.
Yeah. So I totally get that. I just wanted to. I was hoping I could get the first scoop, like those news shows. We got it here first. Exclusive. Roman Delgado revealed that face. But
Which isn't why
exclusive.
extra. Read all about it. Watch all of it.
So you bring up the word sorcerer a lot, and from my background and my knowledge, the word sorcerer is to me kind of equivalent to what people think of the word like warlock. Yeah. Okay. So you said something about it being heavy-handed. What did you call it? The heavy-handed. What? I got it right here.
Working with the heavy hand.
Heavy hand. Working with the heavy hand. Yes. Is that what the equivalent to the left hand path when we talk about magic?
No, the left hand path is its own little thing that has been born out of modern day Satanism and modern day occultism that is mostly ceremonial or has Judeo-Christian or even Hellenistic taints. Working with the heavy hand is a term worked in conjure, in hoodoo. And working with the heavy hand, this is when you do what the hell it is that you got to do in order to set shit straight when people are doing you wrong. Okay. It is when people are being absolute jackasses and they will not listen to reason. So you have to smack them upside the head, magically speaking, to get them in their place. That could be as easily as doing a candle spell. It can be as badly as breaking up a marriage. It could be as badly as taking someone's life to protect someone. Working with the heavy hand is basically doing things that are not in the realm of healing, but closer to what Wiccans call black magic, in order to do something that needs to be done.
So, and that's what from how I was trained and how my belief is, when I hear the word black magic, I was always taught, and maybe, it makes me bring up, like, am I really Wiccan? Because, and I know I am, but I am. I know I'm Wiccan. I believe in that. But I also come from a different kind of past where, to me, black magic is magic. And I was taught by my elder that there is no black or there is no white magic. It's like electricity. It's going to do what it's going to do. And so I think we're saying the same thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. And so here's my theory on the Wiccan Read is, and harm none. First of all, we cannot honestly live by that 24/7. We are always going to harm someone, not knowing that we're harming them.
I just killed lots of bacteria.
Yeah, oops, I killed some. But even that, there are things that we say and do that harm people, and we may not be aware of it, and we have no control over that. So to me, that's a different. I feel that you have to try to live a way to not consciously harm someone, but to live by that and say I will never harm anyone. That's bullshit to me because I think we all as humans, and I'm probably going to get talked to about this from some elders that in the Wiccan community, but I think it's bullshit because we're human. We hurt people all the time. Now, what you're talking about is knowing that what you're going to do to protect yourself or to protect someone you love is going to hinder or hurt or bind someone. And in Wiccan terms, for me, if it comes to that, I am willing to pay the consequences.
Well, that's
kind of how
arguably I have heard some people who've used the Wiccan Read and the Rule of Three in that manner. Is that if you are like ever mind the Rule of Three, what now? Then this comes back to thee. Mm-hmm. But if you're willing to accept the consequences,
well, when it comes to folk magic, particularly in hoodoo and in conjure, the difference is that number one, also in brujeria, we don't have a system of ethics. We don't. I don't.
Yeah.
I don't. You do what you feel you got to do as long as you're willing to live with the consequences of your actions. In hoodoo in particular, however, there is a thought that all of my elders have passed down to me, something that Mama Star taught me. Again, if Mama Star ever watches these, thank you for teaching me everything I know about hoodoo and basically about conjure, as more appropriately called. But the energy is not of karmic retribution or anything like that, because that doesn't exist in Mexican culture and it doesn't exist in hoodoo or in conjure, as I call it. The idea is it justified? Is the person you're cursing genuinely have it coming? Do they really do something to deserve what you're doing, or are they just being a petty little bitch?
Okay, that's the thing. So I hate the word, again.
Judging is the perfect word, and you are the judge of that. You are the one who has to judge that in taking into consideration your own connection to spirit, your own ability to pray and to connect to God, hence the Catholic background, and be able to pray and align yourself with spirit and say, my soul says this is right, my mind says this is right, my connection to God says this is the right thing to do. So it is less about judgment, and it's more about having a spiritual connection with everybody you work with the saints, with the ancestors, and with your divinity that says, no, you have no other choice.
Now, what
is the right thing to do?
And I agree with that because, again, some of my elders did teach us, yes, and harm none, but we have the right to protect our family and protect ourselves. And whatever you feel is right. So maybe I was just taught by very progressive Wiccans, but that's what they told me. And I totally relate to that because we do have the right. We can't just be doormats.
Well, I think there's also a lot out there, if we're going to talk about misconceptions, there's a lot of misconceptions out there about what we can actually do versus what's actually there, because there's a lot of that with the Rule of Three and karmic law and stuff kind of came out to be a PR campaign that wasn't necessarily there in the very beginning.
Yeah, well,
if you go through
my friends in the pagan community in around the Seattle area differentiate the newer batch of Wiccans who are more love and light with Wiccan with a little w, and they say the old school traditional Wiccans who have mysteries of more serious magic that could do some serious damage if it comes to it. Wicca with a capital W.
Well, and don't you think though that still is well, first of all, karma, that's Hindu. Yeah. So
karma was all new to me when I started reading about modern day occultism in the United States. I'm like, really?
Oh, really? Yeah, karma's been around for a long time, and that's not even
in where I grew up and the way I grew up. It's really karma was not a thing.
Yeah.
We don't have that teaching. My teachers in conjure they did not pass on that teaching either. The teaching that I was given by my teachers in conjure, my teachers in brujeria, where if it's justified, you're protected.
And see, and now I want to talk about that because that seems like a very Mexican culture to me, because even the Mexican family I know who aren't practitioners of any kind of metaphysical or occultism or whatever, they could be the type that are just your muggles or your mundane, they whatever. But I feel that their culture, what I've seen of my mother and her family, they are very much about, you mess with us or you mess with someone that I love, we will find a way to get back to you. And so it kind of doesn't surprise me that karma never even played into it, because I grew up with a mother that karma didn't really mean anything to her. If you hurt her or her offspring, it's on. And my mother didn't practice any of that stuff. She just was, it's on. So what I'm saying is, I think culture. Yeah, I think I'm gonna throw my shoe at you. Yeah, don't make me pick up my shoe and beat you with it. What?
La chancla.
Yeah. Yes. So something else I wanted to talk about was you had brought up the sacrifice or the illness that you came across with shamanism, and you said the ecstasy of spirituality. You that was something
You're
that
going to have to be a hell of a lot more specific than that. That question is really broken up.
The what?
The question is broken up in sections that I don't understand what you're asking.
Okay. You had
So
said something about, I wrote down, huh?
You need to rephrase it so I can understand what you're asking.
Okay. I wrote down a quote that you said on your podcast, and it said, the ecstasy of spirituality. And you were talking about it when you talked about when you were 4 and you almost died. And the shamanism initiatory path and whatnot. Is this ringing a bell with you? Because
you're not going to get the same quote out of me. You're not going to get the same conversation out of me. When
no,
I speak, the second it goes out of my mouth, it's gone.
Okay. You had said that, but that resonated with
I relate to that so much.
I relate to that so much.
Talking about shamanism and sorcery both as ecstatic paths is actually quite accurate.
Okay.
I once heard an interview with a Korean shaman on it was televised on YouTube, and I was watching a video of her healing ceremony. And at the end of the ceremony, they asked her to give a quote for the Western world so they could document this beautiful system of healing that was dying because nobody else was stepping up to learn it. And she looked at the shaman and says, if there is one thing I wish you to understand, that it is the role of the shaman to suffer on behalf of others, and in it find ecstasy.
Okay, so that's probably, you did say that, and I wrote that down. There is, to me, what that meant to me, and I wanted to kind of talk about this, was there is spiritual ecstasy that happens, and whatever path it is we take or whatever experience we have, I feel that there's an ecstasy in that, and for some reason, something's telling me that when you go to the like when you're close to death, I've heard people talk about when they're close to dying, there's this peace and there's this ecstasy, and it's like beautiful, and I feel that in my past, that things that I've done in my life, I have been chasing that ecstasy. I've been chasing that feeling. I feel that, does that make sense to you, or what I'm?
It makes sense, and I gotta tell you, you're never going to find it that way.
Okay, yeah, that was the next thing, is because you feel
where the conversation was going.
Yes.
Shamanism and sorcery both are paths of ecstasy, not because we chase after it, or because we seek it out. It is a path of ecstasy because it's a path of service and a path of surrender. I had a friend of mine, well, an acquaintance of mine, who constantly called me a tool. He hated my guts. We're frenemies. We're members of community who hate each other. And I constantly used to thank him when he called me a tool, because a shaman and a sorcerer both are tools in the hands of spirit.
Yeah.
And it is that moment of surrendering to spirit, of giving way into your helper spirits, into your teachers in ordinary reality, in order to bring healing to someone. That moment of unity with the divine is what facilitates ecstasy. To search for it will never grant it. Only finding the right moment and the right time to have a pure, unequivocal moment of spiritual and total surrender to divinity. In Wicca, the closest thing that I could describe would be the first time you are fully invoked.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, absolutely. And so that's what I want to say is that I feel that what you're talking about when you talk about dealing with the dark arts or the sorcery, the black magic and the darkness, and then we talked earlier about I brought up death doula, your work with passing over spirits that are stuck here, and what I wanted to talk about real quick before we get into that is, to me, death and life, when you can acknowledge the hard to say, almost the joy and the beauty in those things. You don't fear death, and I think with everything that we do, whether we're Wiccans or sorcerers or hoodoo, whatever we are, I think I feel that's kind of the key to immortality, is not fearing death and working with that and feeling that once you cross that path, once you cross that line of the dark or whatever the dark is to you, and to a lot of us, death. It's, to me, when I work with death or people or goddesses, I work with a lot of dark goddesses who are about death. It makes me more aware of the beauty in that. And so I wanted to kind of hear, like, when you work with a lot of darker things but where do you find the beauty? Where's the beauty and the light in that? How you work with that? Does that make sense?
Yes. For me, the beauty does not come from the darkness or the light. As someone who's a shamanic practitioner, and the only reason I don't adopt the term shaman is because I said the cultural things, but I have the experiences that most people would a lot of people in my past have given me that label, much to my anger.
Yeah.
But people who do my work, whether it's as a shaman or as a sorcerer, we live in liminal space.
I work with a goddess
that
live
in liminal space, internal.
Yeah.
A sorcerer and a shaman both is, by body, mind, and soul, the axis mundi, the central pillar, the tree of life from which souls can either ascend to the upper world or descend into the lower world. We are that central pillar, that liminal space between the worlds. In pagan terms, we live inside Hecate's labyrinth, inside her wheel. We live in that place where the worlds don't exist. And that is the core of who we are. It is where I find my peace, my grounding, my balance, everything that I am that is healthy. I found it there. For many years of my life, I had a very dysfunctional life and a very unhappy life because I wanted desperately nothing more than to be normal or to have a life in the normal world, in the physical world, because that's what everybody else had, and I was kind of lonely. And it's not until I made peace with what I am and what I've been called to do since I was a child that I found a healthy life. In reality, whether it's a shaman or a sorcerer, both paths are liminal paths. Yeah. And everything that is good about it for us is living in that liminal space.
and we work with Hecate, and she's all about the liminal space in between the. So that's why that's very fascinating, and I can relate to that, is because there is a peace in that. I call it the calm before the storm. And
I have a quote from a very wise fictional woman.
Yes.
Normal is an illusion. What is normal for the spider is chaos for the fly.
Oh.
Morticia Adams.
Clink and drink some Morticia Adams. Clink and drink some Morticia Adams. Oh, you're empty. That's okay.
No, I know a lot of people who are going to watch this are going to be getting the panics twisted in a bunch, because I have such a hodgepodge of many different systems that I practice. But, my original teachers died when I was 8 years old, 7 and 8 years old. So everything that I'm doing has been trying to find those other tools that they could not give me. So if people kind of bring that energy up, what is he talking about, Wicca or about hoodoo or about all these other things? It's, well, the people who were supposed to teach me kind of left me, so I have to find my tools elsewhere.
Well, and I think that's where a lot of the, traditions that we've been talking about kind of find their own roots, because a lot of them have been so disconnected, especially if you're talking about the African Victoria.
Yeah.
Because they were removed from their homeland and they didn't have the ancestral grounds and certain things to pull upon. So they had to find something else that worked.
They had to take it with them. And they had to
a little bit of both. Yeah. A little bit of both.
Yeah. What?
They had to adapt.
Adapt, yes. And so we're coming up to almost an hour, and I would love for you to come back and talk about, because I did not know that you did necromancy. and it's on here in big letters, but I feel that I think that's another show. Don't you think so?
I don't speak on anything about necromancy. I work it. No, I don't. That is respect for the dead.
I'll be sad, but I respect.
Respect for the dead. I do not talk about it on radio, on anything that I do.
Okay.
People experience it. They can make an appointment with me, and they can talk to the dead. I could give them advice on how to do magic with the dead. But that is something that is far too sacred for me to be speaking about in a radio interview.
And I totally understand that. And my fascination is because, working with Hecate, she works with necromancy. You are so Hecate adjacent.
There's a statue of her that I recently purchased in my altar room, because she showed up for me. And she says, I have things to teach. She has work to do with me and I don't know how far that's going to go, but yeah.
Well, I'm not surprised that she showed up to you, because she's probably like, you were on her radar, and she's like, I need to talk to this person. And so, but
the vast majority of my work, however, is not with necromancy. The bulk of my work is shamanic healing, and in particularly unraveling generational curses. And I've had in the last 2 years people come everywhere I had people come to me from Australia, New Zealand, England, Hong Kong, and just to name a few, all over the world, come to me to work with me for releasing curses, and especially generational curses. That is my bread and butter.
So, before we end this, I was listening to all that you did. I listened to a couple of the podcasts. I got through the whole one about shamanism, and then I was getting through another one. And one of the questions that came to my mind was, this work that you do, which is so intense, how do you ground and center yourself afterwards?
Well, there are tools that I've been given by my teachers. A lot of it has nothing to do with grounding. A lot of it has to do with being power-filled, being powerful.
Okay.
And when you're power-filled or powerful, however you want to view it, no darkness, no entity, no nothing that is harmful can touch you. And that is a strictly shamanic thing to do. Mm-hmm. People who are Wiccan have asked me, is it like being invoked? And I say no. Unless you have experienced the essence of being filled with shamanic power, you will not understand it. There are similarities, but it's not the same. When I am doing my work, I am either filled with shamanic power from the spirit world, from non-ordinary reality, or I am working in conjunction through my body with the spirits that help me do my work. They do the work through me.
Okay.
In that case, it is not a question about grounding. It is a question of boundaries. It is a question of we're done working, we're disconnecting, I'm coming back to the real world, I'm doing my thing. Grounding helps a little bit. What helps more is when I have that excess of shamanic power that kind of is left over, is passing it on to someone who needs healing.
Okay.
That's the most that needs to be done.
Okay. So it's really about confidence and about having confidence in your ability to know that what you do is important, and you know what you're doing. And because I used to say that when I was a teenager, I dated a guy that he was into Satanism, and he invited me to, but I had to go through this whole thing because, to make a really long story as short as I possibly can, I researched all different religions growing up, and I was fascinated with different beliefs, and so I didn't claim to be a Satanist, but I was fascinated, and I was dating a guy who was a Satanist, and they would have their meetings and their rituals and whatnot, and I remember he asked me a bunch of questions about my will and about my confidence in myself, and what I see and what I take in, is it going to affect me psychologically or emotionally? And I was 19 years old, so at the time I was just like, yeah, okay, and I kind of faked it, but I ended up not faking it because I had more power in me than I realized at that age. But it was my curiosity that I was like, I will tell you what you want to know because I want to experience it and I want to be a part of it. And so I was a part of a few of their ceremonies and what they did. And I mean, it really isn't what you think. I mean, people think that they've got a virgin on the altar. And
I have a lot of friends of mine. I have a few friends of mine who are members of the Church of Satan. So yeah. I am familiar with
yeah. But they wanted to make sure, because I was a 19-year-old girl that seemed very curious. He wanted to make sure that I was safe, and I didn't even know that I was setting up my boundaries or setting up my guardians or setting up my barriers. But I did.
In my work, it is different. It is not about my will at all. My will is absolutely irrelevant. It is about the trust and the relationship that I have built with my teachers in ordinary reality and my helper spirits and my power. It is about the spirits that I do my work with and our relationship. Everything else is irrelevant.
Well, and that's what I'm saying, is even back then when I didn't know I was a witch. I didn't know who I was or what I was, but I knew that I had power in me, and I set up that because I wasn't easily influenced, because there are things that the Church of Satan and whatnot sometimes will do to someone who is maybe a little vulnerable at times, or is seeking some sort of ego or power, because they're very much about ego and about the things that you deserve. And I understand that. But I just remember him asking me all these questions, and I was like, sure, yeah. And then I went through it, and it was awesome to see it, and I was very educated, because it was an educational standpoint that I was coming from, but I wasn't easily, persuaded to join or see their way. It was more, they had said that you have a lot of power in you. It wasn't resistance, but it was power and boundaries. And you had mentioned that. And when you about not needing to ground because you have you are powerful.
No, it's nothing like nothing at all. It is not power from deities. It's not power from.
No. It's from yourself.
No.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's not for myself at all. The techniques that most shamans and shamanic practitioners use, it is pulling down power from places in shamanic cosmology and being filled with them. It is less. It has no parallels in Western paganism or Wicca, none whatsoever.
Well, I know that. I was just relating my own personal experience with boundaries and whatnot, because you were saying you don't need to ground. You have. What I was interpreting what you were saying was that you have faith and confidence within yourself that you know what you're doing. You don't need to do necessary grounding techniques. You already know that you're okay and you can pass it on or whatnot. And I was just relating a similar story about confidence within your power and yourself, that sometimes you don't need to have the actual grounding. You just need to know that you know what you're doing. It's a confidence thing. I view what you said as confidence. You were going to say something?
I was going to say how I kind of, for my personal interpretation, kind of went out of Reiki. Because when you do Reiki, you're not pulling from yourself. You've got some other source that this is coming from, and you are being a channel. You are being a vessel to go through, and it's going to go to the recipient,
to whatever,
or to yourself, and just heal yourself.
The key word that you just used is vessel.
Vessel.
Yes, and she's a Reiki. She's a Reiki. Yeah, she's Reiki too.
I'm a Reiki master myself, and the key word there is vessel, but it's a completely different energy, a completely different cosmology. It's about embodying shamanic power, and it's something that it cannot be fully described unless you experience it.
Unless you experience it, absolutely. Well, we're at an hour and 6 minutes, so I'm gonna go ahead and end this.
Wrap it up.
I'm gonna wrap it up. Podcast. So thank you so much. I would love to have you back on here and talk about some more stuff. I had a great time. I could pick your brain all night. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close out the show. I'm going to keep you on the recording, and then we'll say our private goodbyes. Is that cool?
Okay.
Yeah, I'll keep you on the call. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. And remember, if you have any questions or comments or anything that you want to know why we do what we do, how we do what we do, what the hell we do, then please email us at
crossroadscoven@gmail.com.
What was that?
crossroadscoven@gmail.com.
Thank you. So remember, everybody, walk with the goddess, be kind to one another, and till next time, blessed be. I'm going to stop the recording. Bye. Okay, how do I stop the recording? Stop recording.